Good morning. So today I have a Factory 5 GTM kit car. If you're not familiar with the Factory 5 GTM, it is a kit car that you buy from Factory 5. You use the C5 Corvette as your donor, and what you do is you basically take the motor, the suspension, the fuel system, all that stuff, and it comes out of the Corvette and goes into the kit. It's kind of one of those at-home builder type of deals. I'm actually pretty impressed with the quality of this. This isn't the first kit car I've worked on. I've seen a couple before in the past that were kind of like a little messy. Just kind of the quality of the build is not really what I'd like to see on a welder's perspective and a fabricator's perspective. But this one's actually got a pretty high quality of build going on with it, so I'm pretty impressed with it. The reason why I have it is it has a 383 stroker in it, LS1. It was built, the motor was built at an engine builder shop not too far away from here, and it has a bigger cam in it and a couple things going on. The customer's main concern is there isn't a lot of drivability to it. It's kind of hard to drive with the size of the cam and everything that's going on with it. So what I'm doing today is I'm going through and doing some base pulls just to see what we got going on. I did 3 pulls this morning. Made 430 horsepower, about 440 foot-pounds of torque. About what I was expecting. I figured it would be somewhere around there. I wasn't 100% sure, but I figured we'd be around that point. It was at another dyno tune shop before it came to me to try and have the concerns addressed that's going on with it. They kind of thought it was going to make a little bit more power than it is, all that kind of stuff. I saw a couple things in there that I could see it making some more power with some adjustments. So they made 427 with it and made 430 here. Pretty much exactly on the same page. I don't know what I'm going to be able to pull out of it or what any of that kind of stuff. We're just going to kind of see and go from there. It has the 383's 11:1 compression. It's got a fast intake going at 241 heads. All that fun stuff going on with it. So, main thing is I'm going to be doing some base work here for it, get it going, and then I'm also probably going to switch it over to speed density. We'll go from there. So, we'll just see what we come up with here. So I went and we pulled one of the spark plugs out of this. I'll get a close up here on the camera so you guys can see a little bit better. But this has a heat range 5 AC Delco in it. Not normally a plug I would run in something of this level of compression. From what the engine builder told me, this is 11:1 compression. A heat range 5 is too hot for that. A 6 would be okay. Considering this guy is talking about maybe going to E85, I'm actually going to end up putting a heat range 7 in. And I'm going to bring the plug up there and kind of show you guys a little bit of a close-up. I did notice on some of the pulls, and I'll go into this a little bit in depth later when I move the camera over to the computer. I go in when I'm doing some of the pulls and I'll advance the timing in the VCM scanner, and I had advanced it 3 degrees, and I heard a little bit of knock on the uptake, going into the pull. A lot of times, that's a cause of having too hot of a plug before it gets into its torque band and all that kind of stuff. So I kind of was curious as to what's going on there, and that's why I pulled a plug, and I'm like, oh wow, this has a heat range 5 iridium in it. Which I'm kind of against iridiums. They have their place, they do their job, but in a performance application, you end up with more issues with running the iridium because the iridium burns back, you end up with a bigger spark plug gap, all kinds of stuff happens, and it just kind of makes it to where it's not really worth running them in a higher horsepower application. I wouldn't be surprised to maybe see a little bit of performance gain out of this by going to a copper core plug like I'm going to do with it. To kind of give you an idea, there's a couple things I've seen with this that I'm just not really 100% happy with. You know, one of them is the PCV setup on it is set, it goes directly into the intake manifold through a catch can. And the way that it's using the PCV now is that there is no PCV valve over on the valve cover, on the passenger valve cover. Right now it just kind of is just in there. So when you take the oil cap off of this thing when it's running, there's actually manifold vacuum at the oil cap itself. That's a big no-no on my end. What I normally will do is run a PCV valve, run a check valve, whatever the case may be on the application, run it into the oil catch can like this, and I'd actually have the lines reversed on this oil catch can, but run it into the oil catch can and then into the intake manifold. Or in a scenario where you have one of the older throttle bodies that has a port vacuum on the top of it right here, just run it into the port vacuum and you're fine. But having it that, you know, it's just running directly, you know, manifold vacuum to the crankcase, what you do is you end up sucking everything past the rings. You suck oil out of the valve cover on the passenger side, and you know, you just kind of end up with a mess. You know, he had said that when he switched to this has a Nick Williams throttle body on it. He said when he switched to the Nick Williams throttle body, the intake manifold was full of oil. Well, there's why. So I'm going to make some changes there. We're going to put some plugs in this tomorrow, and we're going to kind of go from there and see what we get. I'm going to move over to the computer. I'll kind of show you guys a couple of adjustments that I made and what we saw for a power gain. We didn't see a whole lot of it. We saw more torque than anything else out of this. You know, I'll show you guys a little bit of what's going on, and hopefully we can pick it up decently with the computer. So first things first, you know, this is kind of a conversation I've had a couple times on some of my videos, but I'm going to show you the difference between the plugs I'm going to use. This is the plug that came out of it. Like I said, it's a heat range 5. You can see the electrode comes out quite a bit here. You know, we have quite a bit of heat shown in the strap. You know, it's just not really where I would like to see it. What I'm going to end up putting in is this heat range 7 NGK. The electrode is a lot further down on this. I am going to open up the gap a little bit. We'll be running them about 30 on this. These are set to 25 right now. I keep them in stock here on the shelf. So these are actually gapped down a little too far, but we'll go to 30 on these and we'll put them in. You know, and you can even, it's probably extremely hard to see in the video, but if you look real close here, this electrode's getting so hot. There's so much heat in this plug. It's not the right setup for this at the compression that it has. So that's the first thing I wanted to show, is just kind of, you know, the difference in the plugs, what we're looking at, you know, all that fun stuff. And then, you know, like I said, I'm going to switch them out and we'll see if we make some more power out of it. I know that for a fact we're going to see some better performance on the timing map side of things than we had going on before. So that's our first thing. Now to kind of look at the difference here with our runs, I'm going to pull up our first log that I ran, and that was this one here. Now this is something that's a good piece of information for other tuners out there. When I put my information in the computer, just to kind of give you guys an idea, I match my log files up to my runs on the dyno, okay? By doing that, what I'm able to do is I'm able to correlate what I had and what I recorded. Because, you know, sometimes you might have the data log file sitting there running for, you know, 10, 15 minutes when you're doing some other stuff. But what you're able to do is, if you look down here at the bottom, this is our scale for time. Okay, so I started recording this at 11:30 this morning, and there's actually 11 minutes and 30 seconds of record time here, but I didn't really do anything. I didn't even start the car until right here, because I was looking at some stuff that was going on and just checking some stuff out. But you can see this is where I first started the car. But, you know, that was 15 minutes. Oh, sorry, I read this wrong. It was 11:30 is when I started, and I actually had a half an hour of record time almost. So I read that a little wrong, but all that time is down here on the bottom. It actually tells you the duration and all that stuff. So I had it sitting here recording, not doing anything for the first 23 minutes that it was sitting here. I just had it sitting here running. or you know, sitting here with the key on, I was looking at what how the sensors were reading and all that kind of stuff. It's a good time to check and see if you got anything going on weird with maybe a map sensor bouncing around, mass airflow sensor reading weird, any of that kind of stuff. So let's fast forward here and we'll look at our first dyno run. So our first dyno run, I come into it, I started about, looks like I go full throttle at 2600 RPMs. Our engine coolant temperature is 172 degrees, our IAT is 73. The first thing I noticed right out of the box is this thing dropped down to about 24 degrees of timing, and it came up and it flatlined at 26. Okay? My thing here is, I normally will want to see a little bit more timing in on that, and I went and, you know, just kind of giving you a little bit of prelude of what we're going to get to here, is I went and I kind of just took a map that I had, I kind of balanced the two out, and got things started. Now I'm nowhere near close to done with this yet. I want to work on the spark plugs first, because a lot of times the spark plugs can create some sort of false knock for you, and then you're kind of shooting in the dark, you know, as far as are you actually knocking, or, you know, do you have a spark plug knock going on or whatever. So that's where we got to start out first with getting that straightened out tomorrow morning, and then we'll do some more dyno pulls. So first round out, you know, comes in and it just sticks at 26 degrees. And I'll pull up the map for this. It's a pretty interesting map. It's actually really common the way that I see that the timing map was done on this. A lot of guys do it this way. I don't really agree with it, but you know, a lot of guys do it the way that I see here, and you know, it's just kind of a common thing. So the main number to look at here is when I first get into it, it's at 3,200 RPMs. My cylinder air mass is 80 grams, or 0.8 grams to be specific. And at 0.8 grams, I stay there the whole way out, and I go up and down. You know, I go to 8.5 by 3,700, and then I'm at 90 by 4,400. Now, I've spoken about cylinder air mass before in the past in some of my videos about how cylinder air mass can really affect what you're looking at for your timing table. You know, the higher the air mass, usually the lower that timing table will go. Well, when you have somebody going in and flatlining a table like I'll show you, it gives it the same timing map the whole way through, where when you're at a higher load, sometimes you don't want to have as much timing, or maybe you need more. It's one way or the other. You know, it's where you have to kind of tune around that, and by going in and flatlining a table, and here I'll pull up the table and show you guys what I'm talking about. So right now I have the tune in it that I put. This is what I have up on the ECM scanner right now, or ECM editor right now, and I'm going to open a compare file of what was in it, okay? And I'll enlarge this so it's a little bit easier to see. And this is the timing map that was in this out of the box, okay? Now, if you look at this, you know, we're looking at a map that, you know, it came down, and, you know, as soon as you got in throttle at 2,500 RPMs, you know, we were talking, I told you about 80 cylinder was the cylinder air mass. We're at 21, 24 degrees is where it switches over, okay? And that's actually probably somewhere around where this divot is right here. Let's see. Maybe not. No, that's up here where this. So there's a big hole right here in the map. That's what I was kind of looking at. But we're actually all the way down here is where it switches over. So, you know, looking at that, it comes up this ramp right here, and then it just goes flat. And like this whole span of cylinder air mass is just a flat area where it's at 26 degrees. I don't agree with that. The main reason is on an NA motor, the most that you normally see them go to is about right here. You know, usually it's once you go into a power adder situation is when you see the map go up into this area, and there's really no reason to take this part of the table and keep it here. So it'd make more sense to actually take this table and drop it down 5 degrees in that area, and then smooth it from here to there to get it to where it still fell off if it went, for whatever reason, went above there and was overly knocking. Because the higher you go on this scale on the left-hand side here, the more load you have. So it doesn't really make sense to me to have that flat line timing table, but a lot of guys do it this way. You know, a lot of guys have it where the timing map will come down, you know, flat lined like how it is here, where it's like just a flat slope down, and then it'll just be a flat line table out. It's really common. But to give you an idea, all right, the map that I put in, it needs a little bit of perfecting yet, but it does a little bit more of a gradual hill, okay, where it runs a little bit more timing down below, that it helps it out with the torque that way, and then it comes and it falls off. Now, to give you a comparison, and this is what I'm going to show you here, is so we come in, you know, and from about right at 3,500 RPMs the whole way out through, we run all the way out to 6,500 RPMs, we're running 26 degrees. So, you know, that's what we're looking at there. Now I'm going to open up the run that I just did here. This will give you another idea. So, you know, I come in, I get in the throttle. When I first get in the throttle, as soon as it goes to 100% or 2,900 RPMs, I'm at 25 degrees. If you remember, we were a little bit less than that before. So we got a little bit more timing as we come in, and it actually will come up a little bit. We go to 26, and then it comes down to 25. We hold down, and we actually go 24, 23 in the mid-range. Okay, so at about 4,700 RPMs, I actually pulled timing out of it. And if you go and you look at the my dyno chart, well, that was right where I picked up the power at. Okay, you know, when I'm saying the power, I'm saying the torque. So like 4,500 RPMs, my torque is actually 11 more foot-pounds of torque on that run because of that change in the timing. You know, that's a pretty substantial, just, you know, a mid-range thing just to pick up that little bit, you know, is a pretty substantial thing. Now, at the same time, I'm also still a little leaner on the fuel than I wanted to be with this. Originally, what we were looking at with fuel on this is it was at 13.3 at that same spot. Now I was at 13.0. I needed to add a little bit more fuel there on that side of the table, and I just, you know, I had to add a little bit more in there yet. And we'll actually probably even maybe see this torque number jump up a little bit more from the 453 foot-pounds it's at right now. So, you know, kind of going back through, what you end up with is we got on 23, and as I come up to about 5,500, we start adding in some timing, you know, and we actually end back out at the same amount of timing that this thing made. Okay, now, what I was mainly basically looking at here was what kind of response were we going to get out of this by pulling some timing out and by also, you know, giving it the same amount of timing on the end. Because a lot of times when you tune, you want to have the timing on the end, not in the middle. The mid-range is usually where you're going to find none. So, you know, well, that's exactly what I have going on here. Now, and that's why I was explaining earlier, by going and taking that timing table and flatlining it like it was in there, you kind of, you shoot yourself in the foot. You're either flatlining it at what the mid-range would be of, you know, 23 is really what this seems like it should be at. So you're going to flatline it at 23 degrees the whole way out, and I could go in here and I could do another run and show you guys, like, I bet you if I pulled it down to 23 degrees, we're going to drop down probably 10 horse, okay? But now I know, okay, at 23 degrees, it makes, you know, or with the mid-range going at 23 degrees coming back up onto 26 degrees, it actually makes 432 horsepower, okay? Where before it made 427. So we gained 5 horsepower. Not a big deal, like most people wouldn't even notice that, nobody would really care, you know, but what I'm really looking at was the 11 foot-pounds of torque, okay, and we actually got that torque to come in a little bit early at 4,400 RPMs. The other thing to look at here is our fuel line changed. It's really hard to tell because of how close the two lines are here, but, you know, initially I was looking at, you know, let's just look at 3,500 RPMs here. I was looking at 13.2, now I'm at 12.8, at 5,000 RPMs. I was at 13.2 as well, now I'm at 12.9. You know, by 6,000 RPMs, I was at 12.9, now I'm actually at 12.5. So I'm actually a little bit fatter than I was up top, which I could pull that out, but 12.5 is usually my safe spot of where I like to see an NA motor, especially at this compression. Now, the thing that's going to kind of screw things up a little bit is I'm going to go and throw all this stuff kind of out the window a little bit here by changing the plugs. The burn's going to change a little bit. You know, I might see my fuel come back to where I actually might be a little bit richer than I was. I might see my fuel go the other way. We're going to find out tomorrow once we make some changes here with this thing and see what happens. But mainly what I wanted to show you guys here is, you know, a lot of guys will go in and they'll just flatline that timing table, and it's not always beneficial. Now, not every motor is the same. You know, like I said, I'm running the least amount of timing on this, right at about 4,500, 4,700 RPMs. You know, right there at 4426 to 4454, that's when it drops down to 23 degrees of timing. Okay, you can see that here in the histogram as well. So by it dropping down that fuel there, or the timing there, you know, we gain that torque up. And that's the thing to kind of keep in mind is, you know, every motor is a little bit different, but also knowing where the torque band comes on the hardest is where you want to kind of also be modest with the timing. And then to come back around and add that timing on the back end, like we did here, we actually ended up with, 11 more foot-pounds and, 5 more horsepower by doing that. And I don't know what they have going on here. I just kind of went in and took the tune that was in here and kind of worked on it a little bit to see what our basic stuff was. And I'm going to sit down and spend a lot more time with the tune in this first before I, really wrap things up. But I don't even see any kind of knock or anything going on this. And from the looks of it, the way they have the knock sensor table set up, it's almost like they went in and turned them off, which I don't suggest to do. I usually desensitize them a little bit, but I don't turn them off. So that's the one thing that I'm going to have to make some adjustments here on, kind of figure out where the sensitivity level is. With it being the motor being the way it is in the back and the way it's mounted, there is going to be some inherently more noise to it, and that might be why they turned them off. But there's a balance between being off and being too sensitive, and they need to find, they should have found that, but they didn't, and that's what I'm going to find. Now, just to kind of give you guys the same, idea, we did start a little bit warmer on our run there. It was 185 degrees, and the IAT was 82. So we were a little bit warmer when it first started that run out, but, it made more power. Like I said, tomorrow we're going to make some adjustments. I got to get some more fuel for it. We're going to put some 93 in it, and we're going to do some more runs and see what we come up with. So hopefully you guys can see everything pretty well here. I need to really come up with something as far as how I can bring that up on the screen better so that I can show you guys while I'm talking, type of deal. But for now, this is the way I'm doing it, and hopefully it does it well enough that we can all see it. Alright, so I'm back here this morning. I'm going to kind of go over a couple things that I did here with this GTM car. The first thing I noticed yesterday, I spoke about it, was that the PCB system wasn't set up correctly. What was going on, and I know it's probably hard to see in the video here, but you have on the LSs, you have the factory fitting in the back here that has a PCB fitting in it. They got rid of that, and they ran that hose over across into a catch can, and then out of the catch can it went right into the intake manifold. Where it was going in the intake manifold, it was getting full vacuum. So like I had explained, when you would pull the oil cap off, you would have full vacuum at the oil cap. So that was an issue. What ended up happening was that when I took the intake off of here to clean inside the intake manifold, it was just covered in oil. So I put the new plugs in it this morning and got them all gapped at 28. And then I also I rerouted the PCB. I just have it sitting out right now. I kind of want to see if it's going to blow some oil everywhere, see what we got going on. We're going to go from there. And then I just took the intake tube. I switched this over to speed density. There's no reason why I couldn't keep the math, but I just decided to keep it with speed density for now. I like doing the speed density tunes better. It's kind of just one thing to make it a little bit more refined. I'm going to end up redoing this tubing here, but for today, to run it on the dyno, I just have it tilted up here so it's getting some fresh air from up here. I was just going to run an open throttle body, but with the exhaust being right here, I didn't want to do that, so what I ended up doing was just, letting it curve up, for now. The other side of the PCB, which is right here, on this valve cover I have going over, and it's fat. They had modified it and put it right into the intake. That's fine. This is a factory, kind of how the factory is, and that would be okay. So I don't know why they didn't do the PCB the correct way, but whatever. It is what it is. It's set up now to where it'll actually work. So I already did one pull with this. I kind of wanted to see what we were going to have before I went talking about everything going on and all that shit. So, as I was explaining in the video about the spark plugs obviously, will make a big difference with the way a motor is going to run, how it's going to knock, and that kind of stuff. If you have the wrong plugs, then you can kind of really hurt performance. So yesterday, this thing was making 432 horsepower. That's the most I had gotten out of it. Now I had the wideband back here with a little sniffer pipe on it, and it was around 12.2, 12.5, somewhere in that range. Today I moved the wideband. You can see the wiring coming up through here. I moved the wideband up onto the header, and I removed the factory O2 sensor out of there. All I do for that is I go in, I turn the O2 learning off, and just have it not even worry about the O2s, just run an open loop, which is usually how you tune anyways. I have the dyno wideband in there now. I'm logging the left side. We just did one pull, same timing tables as yesterday. You know, everything's basically the same. It made 449 horsepower I think it was like 452 foot-pounds. So about the same amount of torque, but a lot more up top. A lot of that has to do with the fact that the PCV system isn't screwing up the combustion chamber anymore. You know, before, with having that vacuum in there, it would just suck oil out and it was kind of over-oiling stuff. But the thing right now is our fuel is actually not all there that we need. It's only at 13.4, I think is what it was at the top of the pull. And it was lean the whole way through. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to make some adjustments, and then we're going to do a couple more pulls here. You know, it'd be cool to see about 460 out of this, but we'll see. I'm not really sure. I did a little bit of digging this morning and figuring out some more stuff about this motor. The shop that built the motor, when they built it, they just built it with, it's a built 383 bottom end, but it's got factory 241 heads on it. So with having those factory 241s on there, it's going to kind of be our holdback for making any more power. But with doing a different set of heads on this thing, you know, it wouldn't be surprising to see way over 500 horse out of it. So, you know, I'm going to do a little bit more tuning here and, you know, do a couple pulls. finishing up here with the factory 5 GTM. We got some pretty good gains out of it. It's actually more than I was expecting. Alright guys, so I'm here editing the video today for the GTM, and I realized at the very end of that video I seemed real glum. So that's why I sped up what I was incoherently rambling about, and I'm going to get more down to the nitty gritty of where we actually got our gains from on that car. So when it came in, it made 427 horsepower. It left making 460. What I'm going to show here, what I got up on the screen, is how I did that and how we got there and what the reasoning was behind each thing that was going on and how that played out for us on the dyno. So first things first, here's a dyno chart. The big thing to look at here is we had a substantial gain in the max power range. We were at 460 horsepower and 465 foot-pounds of torque. Our first runs out, it was 427 and 446. Maybe you've spoken about this a little bit before, but I usually like to look at what the average power is. And the average power on our run where we made 460 horsepower was 396 horsepower. And on our 427 run, it was actually 334. So the average power range is it's a correlation of how much power has been grabbed from the beginning of the run to the end of the run. And it's an average of what all those numbers are and the sample rate. And then the average torque was 412, and on the 427 run it was 392. Now we didn't gain a whole lot with torque like we did with a horsepower. We gained some substantial numbers, but nothing crazy. And a lot of the times, like in the beginning here, you can see the torque numbers are pretty much overlaying. It was mainly up top where it opens up. Now, as far as fuel goes, I left this a little rich, compared to where it was. I have it at, when we come in, it's 12.7, which is actually, I'm pretty happy with that. I usually like to see an NA vehicle around 12.5, 12.7 at the most. Is about how lean I like to go. By the end of the run, I'm down to about 12.2, right before it shuts down. I like to go a little rich on the end sometimes just because it's when everything is getting hot, when you're getting close to red line, all that kind of stuff. But the main thing I wanted to get to, and I explained earlier in the video, was what I did with the timing. On this, what I had explained was when the guy came in, it was locked at 26 degrees. It didn't matter if you were at 2,500 RPMs wide open throttle or 6,500 RPMs wide open throttle. The timing was going to be 26 degrees. So I don't really agree with that. In certain scenarios, you don't need that much timing, or maybe you need more. It just really depends on the motor, and that's kind of the lazy way of making a timing map. And it made power, and let's not be, incorrect here and say it didn't make power, but there was some things that were held back on that motor that, we're holding it back, and like we talked about, one of the things was the spark plugs, and the other thing was that the way the PCV system was routed, it was keeping it from actually, what it was doing, it had so much vacuum, it was pulling everything past the rings when it was under a run. Now, that's not to say that it was going to affect it as much under wide open throttle. It was more under the drivability side of stuff. When you're at a higher vacuum, you're pulling all the combustion gases through the ringlands and down into the crankcase. You figure if you have 10 inches of vacuum in the crankcases, it's going to suck everything past the rings. To have a little bit of vacuum in the crankcase is okay, but 10 inches is ridiculous. Like you wouldn't want it to be that high. That's why the PCV has a spring in it. So when it's under a certain amount of vacuum, it actually will close. So by not running a PCV valve, it was kind of counterintuitive. So to kind of get back to what I was talking about with the timing, I'm starting to run to about 2,500 RPMs. At 2,500 RPMs, I was at 28 degrees advance. It's pretty normal for me to put that much advance in when, on an NA vehicle, to put it in at that range. You know, depending on the build, it might even be more, it might be less. It really just depends. Like I said, every one is a little bit different. And then as we get to 3,500, I start ramping it down because we're getting into the power end of the motor, and you can actually see that in our dyno chart. At about 4,000 RPMs is where we start picking up. From 35 to 4 is where the cam really starts opening up on this thing. That's where the torque starts coming up on it. That's where a lot of times when you get into that peak torque area is actually when you want to run the least amount of timing that you're going to see throughout the, throughout the power band. So, at 4,000 RPMs, I have the timing down to 24 degrees. And as it comes up, it stays right at about 24, 25. I start putting the timing back in at 5,200, which if you come back to the dyno chart, you can see at 5,200 we start falling off. Our peak torque on this was at 4,450. So, like I said, we're starting to fall off on the timing a little bit there, or starting to fall off on the torque, I should say, a little bit there. So I start adding some timing in on the end, to give it that little bit of the, bottom end punch on the end there. So, as we come back into it, I'm back up to 26 degrees, which is what it was at to begin with. And then I believe I end this out at 27 is what we end out on, all the way up to 6,800 RPMs. Now, the big deal there was, when I first brought this in, I had mentioned that the knock sensor sensitivity was turned down. Well, yeah, they had it turned down so that it would, if it would knock, I actually heard it knock before it would register on the VCM scanner. Now, you can see with my knock ratio graph here, I don't have anything logged at all for knock in this dyno run. And the reason being is the motor is happy, it's got the timing right where it belongs, it's happy with what's going on. Now, the one thing I can tell you is I put the knock sensor sensitivity back to factory. The way that came out of the box, I put it right to it, and I actually tuned around it where it was and didn't get any knock in it. Except when I first started tuning it, I had a little too much timing right about there, about 3,800 RPMs. I had it at, I think it was at around 26, and it was registering some knock. And I actually was able to hear it too. It's kind of the advantage of having a mid-engine car, is it's sitting right behind my ear, so I'm able to hear what was going on. And I heard the knock, I saw the knock, and I was like, okay, we actually have knock here. And I went and I pulled the timing down to 25, it went away, pulled the timing down to 24, and it didn't change it at all. So I was like, okay, we're right where we need to be anyways. And it was such a minuscule amount of knock that was going on, like it was only registering about a half on the knock ratio scale. And that was okay. So, like I said, I took mainly the knock sensor tables in the wide open throttle range. I put them back to factory. It is possible to see some knock because of a big cam. You'll see it come up at idle, stuff like that, because of how low the motor can get. So there is some adjustment that has to be done down below in HP tuners to make it not read knock at idle. But otherwise, up top, it didn't have any need for it to have the knock sensors being turned off the way they were. And with it being at the 26 degree table that it originally was on, I actually, like I said, I had noticed that it was knocking even on my first pull. Some of that was plug related. It was definitely not pinging as hard once I changed the plugs. But I also wouldn't have been able to roll in that on 28 degrees of timing with the plugs being where they were at with the heat range 5s that were in there. So mainly just wanted to kind of show you guys kind of a final wrap up of what was going on here. I know it's good to a lot of times show you the graph so you can kind of see what's going on. And I'm going to put the graph at the end of it as well here. But like I said, we ended with 460 horsepower and 465 foot-pounds of torque. And then I already spoke with the guy, the car's back to him, all that kind of stuff. And we're going to be doing a set of the trick flow heads on it. So I will have a video of that probably about the beginning of the year. So thanks for tuning in, guys, and I'll be back with more videos later.